Yeah.
for today's video, and that's gonna be Daddy Longlegs,
Yeah.
which is the feature-length debut for the Safdie
I think
Bros.
it was their
Actually, it's not
second.
their
Yeah.
second movie after A Pleasure of Being Robbed, but their first, I think,
To, like, get a lot of
almost not.
attention.
Yeah, I have to go by doing the overview, but I'll also probably twinkle in a couple of Safdie Bro facts that I know because why not, right?
Yeah.
Love it.
So this movie is released in 2009 and it stars Ronald Bronstein as the lead character who plays one of the worst on-screen fathers probably of all time.
Yeah.
In terms of the fact that he is just not responsible.
No.
He is a worker at a projectionist in he's a projectionist in New York that is divorced, and when he has to deal with dual custody with his children, he does not know how to take care of them
He
at
is not
all.
fit for it.
To the point where he is literally drugging his kids, and he drugs them too much, they fall asleep for a week, and
He
he'll just come home on the 4th day of work and be like, You up? You up?" And they're just passed out.
Yeah,
He
it
doesn't even
goes
go
there.
home, he, like, calls his apartment to see if they're awake, like, he's not even home, but we can get into
Just
that.
Yeah.
the worst dad.
And
Deadbeat
this
dads are not
movie
cool.
sprouted out because the Safdie brothers became friends with Bronstein after a film festival where he released Frownland, which is also another Criterion movie. And they essentially went up to him and said, "We think you could play a version of our father that is also." This is a very personal movie because I think the twin brothers in the movie are actually the Safdie bros. I'm just gonna go out and say it.
Hmm,
And the
Oh,
father
yeah, I think so.
figure in this movie is
definitely.
definitely, if not heavily inspired by their own father, who, was he ended up
A
divorcing
real
their
D.
mother. And not a real D, but like he had like other things in his life. I'm pretty sure he was
Yeah.
an architecturalist in New York, so
I
like he
just
was
wish he did.
juggling his job.
Yeah, I just hope they didn't get drugged.
Yeah, it's possible because that's such a quirky situation to have.
Yeah,
But
Did
it's
they ever address that? Like, if that's a real story?
I think they've been asked, but they probably just shy away from answering because that's just like, I don't want to throw my dad under
yeah,
the
it
bus
is such
here.
a personal work of theirs and such a, like, a
Fair, yeah.
sometime an often quite funny, but sometimes pretty uncomfortable work. It almost reminded me of it definitely reminded me of Funny Pages, a picture that they produced later, a very good film directed by Owen Kline, and it has a similar tone to that, although when I first saw the film, I when I first watched it, I was like, "This is a Safdie Brothers movie?" I was kinda surprised having only seen their more recent, more well-known stuff like Good Time, Uncut Gems.
Yeah, and this is
It's not
clearly
quite as
their
anxiety
least
inducing as those.
exactly. Very, very chill watch. At times it gets a little
Kind
dicey
of.
because yeah, the father figure character whose name I will is Lenny. The character's name is
Yeah,
Lenny. He,
those
might I
sideburns
add,
though.
is just so tunnel
Great
visioned in
sideburns.
his world that he is to the point of not just disregarding children, but disregarding even friends and family, right?
Yeah, even homeless guys.
Yeah.
Lucas, what you
I
what do you
mean,
think of this movie just overall?
I loved this movie. I really, really loved this movie. And you're right, like, if you're looking for kind of like a pulsing, just, like, I don't know, cardiac arrest inducing thriller, crime thriller.
Probably not gonna get it.
No, you're not gonna get it here. There I was also surprised just because there's, like, moments of just, like, real, like, tenderness. There's just, like, cuteness
Yeah.
a lot of the time, and I know, like, we open saying he's probably the worst father ever,
Yeah, but it's, like,
but
kind of a warm movie,
yeah,
surprisingly, for
he is,
I
like
never thought I'd say that about a Safdie Brothers movie.
yes, and, he's got 2 weeks with these kids, right? Like, and most of the rest of the year, they're with their mom, so he's really just trying to, like, be like a fun machine, like constantly instilling kind of memories in these kids that they won't forget about
Yeah,
him
he's like,
later on.
now I'm the fun dad, now that
Yeah.
I'm divorced."
Yeah, but that boundary between fun and, like, angry is always
Dangerous.
yeah, it's because he's
Yeah,
clearly just irritated from work and, like, even just the responsibility of picking these kids up from school for 2 weeks out of the year
it's
is
like
it's
an
driving him
inconvenience for
crazy.
him.
Yeah.
And
He
yeah.
We even
I was just gonna say such a powerful opening too of him, eating a hot dog in Central Park, jumping a fence,
2 hot
tripping
dogs in 1
tripping
bun.
horribly, and then proceeds to, have the hot dog hit the grass and, like, all over the
yeah,
floor, and he picks it up and
smooth.
starts eating it again and laughing to himself.
No, don't
What a
do it.
great way to introduce Lenny to us as an
Yeah,
audience because that's just a sliver of how chaotic this guy is.
and he asked for a foot long.
Yeah,
Why?
but they could not accommodate that.
Yeah, I also thought it was really interesting too that the Safdie brothers actually found these 2 kids on the street apparently and were like, "Do you wanna act in this movie?" They are
Wow.
incredible child actors, and credit to everybody in this movie because I know this budget is not super big, and it's shot on 16 millimeter film, which, like,
Yeah,
I don't think is a
it's pretty
commonly used
grungy looking.
practice. Very grungy looking.
Yeah,
What
it's
did you
like
think of
shot.
the visual aesthetic, Lucas? Did it work for you?
Oh, definitely, and I think that's, like, one of the, like, touchstone Safdie brother, uh yeah, like, aesthetic choices. Like, that was one of the only things I was clinging to as, like, a familiar, uh, like, element to this movie as a Safdie brothers movie was, like yeah, like, the actual use of film stock and everything like that, and, like, the handheld neorealist style.
Yeah, I
Um
it kinda reminded me of a Sean Baker early Sean Baker movie, Takeout, which I actually got to see in a class on New York and film last semester. Another solid film I'd recommend if you're into the New York independent scene. Fairly similar in style to this one, a little more hectic with the pacing in terms of because it's about a delivery boy for a Chinese takeout restaurant who has to constantly rush to get food delivered and to angry customers. So I felt like it honestly it felt kind of Daddy Longlegs felt kind of more in line with stuff like that than the Safdie's later works, which kind of goes to show like how they have stylistically evolved from this.
Yes,
Definitely.
you can definitely also see the, like, Cassavetes influence.
Yes,
A lot
definitely.
of people drop Cassavetes as, like, a big, name or inspiration for them, but you cannot see a trace of it in a lot of the people that will name him, but with the Safdies, like, that is absolutely the case,
Yeah,
especially Daddy Longlegs.
because Cassavetes more or less invented the sort of the neorealist American independent film sort of slice of life, kind of not much plot sort of style, and
Yeah.
a lot of it can be owed to that.
And I think too, just such a good early impression of their character writing because I have to be honest, I saw The Pleasure of Being Robbed and I don't really understand some of the plot points and some of the characters in that movie, but in this one, every single character I think had a purpose and was acting their tails off mixed with just good casting. I love the Safdie brothers, guys. I think they're fantastic filmmakers, and this is one of the first ones where I was like, "There we go. This is the
Definitely
style."
certainly among the more, like, interesting stylistic, those, like, visionary directors to come out of the modern American independent, like, A24 scene. Even though they were veterans of the New York independent, and thankfully, they have gotten a wider audience with Good Time and Uncut Gems.
Also, is it just me, or did it seem like these kids just had the greatest time filming this movie? Or maybe they're just the best actors and they were put in, like, a great situation, but, like, it just seemed like a ball.
I honestly I was listening to an interview which is on the Criterion disc about this movie and essentially the mother of one of the children was telling Benny Safdie that it was a little bit tough for them because they couldn't distinct Lenny from Ronald the actor. They thought Lenny and Ronald were almost the same person at points
Wow.
because the character was written for Ronald and so, like, they did have fun, but I think it was complicated for them shooting because it felt so real.
Yeah, that
Yeah, it
must always be an
definitely.
issue, especially, like, with, child actors in, like, sitcoms or something where people are playing their parents for,
Yeah,
so many hours of a week, like,
and,
that whole
yeah, and
confusion.
I'm a child of divorced parents myself, and I there were moments of this that, like, hit fairly close, even though I'm
Yeah.
I'm in different circumstances than Lenny in this film.
Yeah, and I also just to mention, like, just a fun fact, the interview between Benny and Josh Safdie that I listened to, they also mentioned that this movie they always look back to this one as kind of their motivational movie in terms of they're always looking to get a bigger paper pile that can be, sprayed across the floor because there's a scene in this movie where essentially a bunch of paper falls on the floor and wind, spirals it all over the place. And
I
essentially how they filmed this was with leaf blowers and like four guys just like tossing paper. And it's so run and gun like that they said now all they think about is how can they make a bigger one of those scenes. And I'm like, that's such a
Yeah,
good
Right.
mentality to have.
they're probably gonna do like Inception where they literally have it blowing everywhere out of all the
Yeah.
windows, and plus the paper itself ends up being this very seemingly childish cartoon that they drew of Lenny pissing in his boss's drink based on a true story. So that kind of gives you a little bit of perverse background into this character.
Yeah, and I also want to ask Lucas, what did you think of the mosquito sequence in this movie? Because I think that was probably the most trippy part of this very down to earth picture.
Yeah, I mean, I was first of all not expecting like a sweet family comedy drama from the Safdies, and I certainly was not expecting like a Safdie surrealism to come
And
up out of nowhere.
literally Daddy Longlegs shows up.
Yes, like I never would have thought that they were interested in dream sequences, honestly. I thought they were so completely dedicated to this neo-realism or whatever they want to call it.
Although there
Um
are, like, hints of it at especially in the opening of Uncut Gems where you quite literally get an acid dream sequence through a colonoscopy.
right, right, right.
So there is a bit of, like, hint of that, like, Safdie brothers sense of surrealism, although it is kind of
I think it
sprinkled in.
always is, like, there's a little bit of surrealism in their movies, but for the most part, their hyper realism is what kind of makes a Safdie brothers movie so anxiety inducing,
Yeah, and
right? But
partly
they'll toss in a little trippiness. Like, I remember in Good Time even, some of those neon colors were hitting in that playhouse area.
yeah.
Yeah, and, like, the creature work on that mosquito, like, is very, like, Cronenberg, like, even, like,
Yeah,
Eraserhead
I was
sort of,
kinda
like
surprised that they could do that on the tiny budget.
yeah, like, the, like,
Although
blood sac kind of, like,
although I
pulsing and
although I guess I
everything.
Yeah.
could kinda understand because they shoot it mostly in close-up so as to hide some of the effects
Yeah.
work, but
Yeah,
it still,
I'd
like, looks
recommend actually if you're
convincing.
interested in that watching it's literally Josh holding like this mosquito they made and he's just filming it and his brother's holding the camera. It's sick to watch cuz I'm like, wow, that came out so much better than it looks how you filmed it.
I also like the division of labor that I've heard, I mean, like, it's in the credits anyway, but that, like, Josh works as basically like a DP or like a co-DP, and, like, Benny Safdie works the boom mic, and I think that's really sweet because like, Benny, he said in interviews that, like, I love working audio and doing the boom mic because like, you're right there in the action, and, like, if
Yeah,
there's any kind of notes to be given, like, you're just in it already, and, like, you're literally listening on headphones, like, every inch of dialogue, everything. So I like how they are totally invested and hands-on, and I
and
just think it's really cool.
even in, like, the seemingly little sections of filmmaking that you see at way, 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 way down the credits. But that's guerrilla filmmaking in of itself.
Right.
They probably first of all, they couldn't have had permits to shoot any of this, especially as they go into the museum. I was like, I don't know, I don't even know how they were able to get in there.
I even think the reason why the characters are projectionists is because they were able to shoot in the projection studio
Yeah,
where Ronald Bronstein worked. So they were literally figuring out
Oh,
ways
okay.
how can we shoot this and not get sued after
yeah,
the movie.
it's almost like how they did Clerks, how they just like had the convenience store available, so Kevin Smith just had to shoot there, and he was like, might as well with no money whatsoever. And with the low budget, that's probably why they a lot of the times throughout the film, like, a lot of the film clips, as far as I can tell, are in the public domain. So you see, like, some of the old cartoons, so you wouldn't have had to pay for that.
And I think because they are able to jump in as a boom operator, as an actor, as a director, it gives their movies a certain energy that I think is hard to replicate.
Yeah,
'Cause
that's the case
they're
with a
they're
lot of.
they're almost making these movies like, 1, it's gonna be their last one, and 2, if I don't hold this boom mic here, we're not getting sound. And I think it equates to just more effective energy-inducing filmmaking.
Yeah,
Right.
it certainly, like, feels like it they definitely, like, feel energetic compared to other certainly, like, a lot of other low budget filmmakers who are oftentimes, like, more willing to do, like, sort of a quiet drama, like a quiet sort of mumblecore movie that takes place mostly in people's bedrooms, but, like, Safdie's definitely not to put anybody making those under the bus, but Safdies definitely have a bit of ambition to them, like, even in their earlier works.
Yeah. I kinda wanna go into this. Was there any flaws with this movie? Because I could see some people having issues maybe with this protagonist is sometimes very unlikable,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Um, I feel like there were a couple of not to mostly nitpicks, but mostly like with some technical issues with the filmmaking, which do come with a smaller budget. And there were even some parts during some of these pretty, admittedly pretty shaky shots where there were issues with the rack focus.
Mm.
Not to throw you under the bus, but you went on to better things.
I think to that point too, it was tough to get all of it in focus at times
Yeah,
because the
definitely.
camera does kinda move around and is handheld for a lot of this movie.
Yeah, it's handheld. It didn't it usually that bothers me in a lot of especially student films that I've seen and other independent films. It didn't quite bother me here because they went with just headfirst into neorealism, whereas a lot of other films I've seen that use handheld use it too much to the point where it's kind of first of all like unnecessarily headache inducing, and second of all, it makes it look and feel kind of pretentious and mumblecore-y, and
I think here though, it doesn't
it
do
works
that
here
because it
better.
fits the aesthetic of the movie, the tone of the movie. This character is essentially an insect in New York City, right? Daddy Longlegs, right? So
Yeah,
I
so
think I
if the
think it
camera's kind
did
of
fit.
flying around.
I think it fit. What did you think, Lucas?
No, I thought it worked really well. I would be interested to see the Criterion release of it. I unfortunately did not see, because they just, like, newly,
Yeah,
uh,
it was I think
restored it,
it
released
was
it.
just, like, late last year that they put it out, so it's
Yeah.
I think they put that and Frownland out at roughly the same time, so they're starting to pick up some of the New York indie films from that time and from filmmakers who have since gone to make it as big as the Safdies. And might I add, there's actually early on in the film, there's actually a cameo appearance from Abel Ferrara, veteran independent filmmaker from New York, who was quite a pioneer of that scene. He was given a brief role as this old guy who's robbing Lenny, basically pretending to be a record salesman, going like, "Hey, do you want some Bill Withers? Want?"
Yeah, and what a flex too to put Abel Ferrara as a side character in your movie because Bad Lieutenant. I don't know if anyone's seen that, but it's quite a movie with Harvey Keitel.
Yeah, that was a nice little nod to him because he did a bunch more stuff. He did The Addiction, The Funeral, a Ms. 45. He was King of New York is probably his most like well known. So they definitely like paid a bit of homage to one of the sort of pioneers of that scene.
Definitely. Well, on that note, I just want to say that my letterbox review for Daddy Longlegs was also a 4.5. Granted,
It was a three and a half, I
I
think.
am a little bit biased. I love like realistic movies that are kind of heartwarming, weirdly at times, and I thought this movie did it quite well for the low budget that it had.
Yeah, for me, it's a 4.
To 4,
I thought you
solid.
gave it a 3.5. At
I
least
think
last
I
time I
think
checked.
I might have gave
Oh,
it, but then
exposure,
I
exposure.
rewatched it. It did get better, I must admit,
You liked
because
it better?
yeah, because I watched it
Gotcha.
when I was like 2 years ago when I was younger, and I don't know. I think I aged more, so the movie probably is just more my type. Because
Yeah,
I can see like a young kid watching this and being like, I just watched a dad mess around for 2 hours and
and
not
you
really
also
get repercussions for it,
yeah,
essentially.
and you also see him very naked at the beginning of the film.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I had trouble too as a younger person watching it to understand the importance of this movie because I wasn't thinking like, "Oh, these filmmakers have a father that they're riffing off this story." I was just like, I just watched a dad mess around. I didn't get the nuance part of it.
I
Yeah,
think
that
I would have really appreciated this when I was a bit younger, at least kind of like late middle school era, because at the time I was into the kind of like super shaky handheld dramas like Half Nelson and Fish Tank and that kind of thing. So this would have come in handy back then, but even now, I do agree. I probably would not have picked up on a lot of the like the little
the
details, the
nuances of
nuances.
it.
Yeah, the emotional
And I
stakes.
think too, there is a slight disconnect for me just on the basis of I'm not a child of divorced parents. So this
Yeah.
lens is fascinating to look at, but it's not something I can totally, you know, devote myself completely and utterly relate to.